Hey lovelies. So don't ask why I'm using the I Love Bella trend thing on YouTube for Avatar World, but yeah. Hey lovies. Today we're gonna be reading a book, and I'm gonna start doing this on my channel more often. But don't worry, I'm still gonna do other videos. Not only this kind of content, so I'm also gonna do other type of content. So we're gonna read Bob. We're gonna read Bob. What? We're gonna read Bob and An Odd Job for Bob and Betty. Yeah. There we go. So here is Bob and Betty. I wonder what this book is about. So let's get into this. So, An Odd Job for Bob and Benny, written by Nick Warburton, illustrated by Wendy Smith. A very odd job. Bob and Benny were out on their lawn painting a sign. Benny splashed on the colors, and his brother Bob painted the words. It was a messy business, but they didn't mind mess. Don't mind that. This is Benny's sign. It says, Benny and Bob, any odd jobs. Bob and Benny, odd jobs any. It rhymes. Kind of rhymes, like not really. When the paint was all gone, there was a sign. The sign. When the paint was all gone, there was the sign finished. It said, Benny and Bob, any odd jobs, Bob and Benny. Odd jobs any. Huh? It said, Benny and Bob, any odd jobs, Bob and Benny, odd jobs any. I like it. I just like it for some reason. I like odd jobs any. That's us, Bob said. That's us, Bob said. We're going to be odd job men, starting today. They fixed the sign to their front gate. Then Benny went back to clean up the lawn, and Bob went into the kitchen to wash their jumpers. That was when Mrs. Catkin came along and saw their sign. She lived in a big house at the top of the village. It looked very grand, but inside it was rather ramshackle. This was because of Daisy, Mrs. Catkin's pet elephant. Daisy was only a baby, but she was rather a lively baby. Mrs. Catkin wanted to visit her sister, but she couldn't take an elephant with her. That's Bob and Benny with their sign. There you can read it. Bob and Benny. Bob and Benny, there you go. The sign, Mrs. Catkin's in her. Okay, Bob and Benny, any odd jobs? And Bob and Benny, odd jobs, any, yeah. And she couldn't find anyone in the village. To look after Daisy. They all said an elephant was too big and too tricky. She looked over the fence and saw Benny trying to wash the lawn. "I've got an odd job for you," she said. "I must go see my sister, and I want you to look after my baby elephant." Benny was thrilled. "Hooray!" he sang out and skipped around a little circle. That's why he only heard half of what Mrs. Catkin told him. He heard her say sister, and he heard her say look after, and he heard her say baby. The rest he missed. "She can stay in your shed," said Mrs. Catkin, "and she likes a bun now and then. And you will be nice to her, won't you, Benny?" "Of course," said Benny, bouncing up and down. "Good. I'll bring her round tomorrow." That's why I was saying, he's t-shirtless. Y'all, I'm so tired. Okay, anyway, we're gonna finish this book. Maybe I'll finish it tomorrow, y'all. Anyway, Mrs. Catkin went home, and Benny rushed in to tell Bob the good news. Bob was thrilled too, and he and Benny danced around the kitchen, and bubbles and foam flew all over the place. It was a messy dance, but they didn't mind mess. "But what is this job?" asked Bob, stopping suddenly. Benny was screwed up. His eyes and thought hard. Benny had screwed up his eyes and thought hard. What was Mrs. Catkin had told him? "I know," he said. "At last, we have to look after Mrs. Catkin's baby sister. She can stay in our bed, and she likes the sun." "Are you sure?" "Almost certainly," said Benny. "Then let's get ready," said Bob. Their own bed didn't look soft enough for Mrs. Catkin's baby sister, so they found some cushions and piled them on top. "She should be happy on that," said Bob when they'd finished. "She should be very happy on that," said Benny. Oh, my eyes, guys. And there's 31 pages. That's why I'm so, tired. Daisy. Easy. Guys, let me lay down. I'm going to stop showing you guys the pictures, guys, because I'm actually getting really, really tired, and I'm just a normal schoolgirl. So, yeah. And sorry, parents, if you want your kids to see the picture, but I am really, really tired. Hopefully you understand, and I am very sorry. So, yes. Daisy. Blah, blah, blah. The letter, I can't read it. Blah, blah, blah. When Benny and Bob opened the door next morning, they staggered back in surprise at what they saw. Mrs. Catkin smiled and held out a note. "I've put the instructions in this note," she said, but Bob was too shocked to answer her. Benny whispered, "There's an elephant on our doorstep." Benny whispered, "There's an elephant on our doorstep." Benny could see that he screwed up his eyes and tried to remember what Mrs. Catkin had said to him yesterday. I think this must be Mr. Catkin's baby sister, he whispers back. It can't be. It's an elephant. This is Daisy, said Mrs. Catkin. And she's looking forward to staying with you. She gave Daisy a pat, put the note on the mat, and turned to walk away. Bob and Benny were too stunned to say goodbye. They stared at Daisy with their mouths open. Benny and Bob, you're a clot. It was your idea to do these. It was your idea. Benny, said Bob, you're a clot. It was your idea to do odd jobs, said Benny. You're the clot. Guys, I'm going to start reading fast actually now. I'm sorry, I'm very sorry, but I'm actually really tired. For some moments, they stood on the step trying to knock each other's hat off. Daisy watched them with interest when their row was over, but Bob and they thought to bring her indoors. After all, she is our guest. So they squeezed her through the door and led her into the house. Daisy liked the look of it. It wasn't too tidy, and there was lots of interesting things she could pick up with her trunk. This is your bed, Miss Catkins. This is your bed, Miss Catkin, said Benny when they got to the bedroom. Daisy liked the look of the bed too. She picked up some of the cushions and flung them around the room. Then she put a foot on the mattress to test it out. There was a twanging sound, and the bed fell in. Are you sure she has to sleep in our bed? Said Bob. Yes, said Benny. Bed and sun. That's what Mrs. Catkin said. I think. Well, there's no sun in here, so we must think of something else. Finding the sun. After a while, Bob had a good idea. We must put the bed in the lawn, he said, so we can get the sun. Excellent, said Benny. Some ideas are simple to think about, but hardly to carry out. This one was one of them. Bob and Benny tried to lift the bed. One stood at the top, and the other stood at the bottom. Bob and Benny heaved and heaved, but it didn't move, not even a tiny bit. Heaved and heaved, but it didn't move, not even a tiny bit. Maybe, said Benny, we should ask Daisy to get off. For once, you've thought of something useful, Bob said. They talked to Daisy in a soft and sweet voices, but she took no notice. She liked Bob and Benny's bed. She was happy there. All she needed was a bun to make it perfect. This is no good, said Benny. We can't lift this bed with an elephant on it. You have to think of something else. So Bob scratched his head and tried to think of another idea. We can't get the bed into the garden, he said. So what must we do? Bring the garden to the bed, said Benny. Clot, said Benny. Clot. If we did that, where would the sun be? Where it always is, outside. So what must we do? Bring the sun inside. Yes, exactly. Ben was pleased to be right, but he didn't know how they were going to bring the sun into the bedroom. That's easy, said Bob. We'll make a hole in the roof. On the roof. Bob and Benny went outside to fetch the ladder. Daisy stayed on top of the bed. She was quite comfortable, but she missed them. They were kind to her and they made her laugh in an elephant sort of way. She looked out of the window and saw them struggling with the ladder. She tottered backwards and forward, trying to lean against the house. Then she saw them climb the ladder and disappear onto the roof, and she was alone again, alone and hungry. She looked around the bedroom, no bun in sight. The cushions looked a bit like buns, but they were really big and too dry. I have to go and look for one, she thought. So she got up and wandered through the house. Meanwhile, Bob and Benny were at work on the roof. They had a hard time of it because it started to rain. This is no good, said Benny. The sun's gone. Never mind, Bob said. We must carry on. They pulled some tiles off and hammered away the plaster. It was messy work, but they didn't mind mess. When they made it a good big hole, Bob sent Benny back down the ladder. See what it looks like from the bedroom, he told him. Down went Benny, and minutes later he stood in the bedroom. There a plaster in puddles everywhere. He called up to Bob, never mind, can you see the sky? Yes. And can you see it from the bed? Yes. I just didn't like it. I don't know why not, because she's not here. What? Bob was shocked. He slipped on the wet roof and fell through the hole, landing on a pile of cushions. He bounced lightly up and down until little by little, he came to a rest. That was lucky, Benny said. It was not lucky, said Bob. I just fell through the roof. But you didn't land on Daisy, did you? Bob jumped up. Of course he didn't land on Daisy, because Daisy wasn't there. We have to find her, he snapped. Quick, Benny, get looking. Benny picked up some cushions and looked under them. He moved the clock. He moved the clock and looked behind it. It's not in here, said Bob. We must search in the whole house. They ran through every room in the house, calling for Daisy, but she was nowhere to be found. Where is Daisy? Then Benny saw the letter on the roof doormat. Oh, look, he said. She's left a note. Don't be silly, said Bob. She can't write. She's only a baby. Someone's left a note. Someone's baby, that's what they're trying to say. Or someone's kid, I don't know. So someone's baby kid, I don't know, left a note. Bob picked it up. Oh, sorry about that. Bob picked it up and read it. It was the note Mrs. Catkin had left. Dear Bob and Benny, don't forget to be nice to Daisy. She can sleep in your shed, and she likes plenty of buns. Shed and buns, said Bob, shaking the note at Benny. Not bed and son. Well, I was nearly right, said Benny. You clot, why didn't you listen? And why didn't you pick up the note? You're the clot. Oh no, said Bob. Look in front of the doorstep. Perhaps she popped out to the baker's, said Benny. Got to get some buns. Almost done, y'all. Yes, said Bob. Brilliant. Come on. Out they ran, up and up the street to the baker's, calling Daisy's name. And as they went, and thank goodness, there she was, safe and sound, picking buns off the baker's shelf with her trunk. Bob and Benny danced with joy at the sight of her. And Daisy did a much heavier dance at the sight of the buns. The only one who wasn't dancing was the baker. Look at it, she shouted. Look at it. It's shoplifting. But he calmed down when Bob paid him for the buns, and they led Daisy out of the shop. their shed, and Daisy went in after them. She fitted very nicely, and with the door open, she had a good view of the garden. Finally, last 2 pages. In the afternoon, the rain stopped, and she watched Bob and Benny mow the lawn. Then they got her to walk up and down to make the lawn flat. Daisy enjoyed that. She liked to be useful. They gave her a grass clippings on a big dish with buns on top. She enjoyed that too. Last page. When Mrs. Catkin came back from her sisters, she was delighted to see Daisy looking so well. You've done a very good job, boys, she said, and she paid them well with money. They bought 2 large umbrellas. When the rain came back that night, they laid in bed with the umbrellas. They dozed off to the sound of the rain pattering on the umbrellas, but it was still a bit messy, but they didn't mind mess. That's it for today, y'all. I'm so tired. I want to go sleep now, so hope y'all have a good night, and tomorrow y'all have a good day, and peace, y'all.